Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, I thought tonight we would talk about terms that have been widely used and discussed recently and talk about the meanings of them with, of course, in light of the chivalric virtues, as we always do.
Sure.
And I thinking of these as ocracies.
Right. Ocracies and isms. I,
Yes.
and
Those,
I thought of Ferris Bueller when when you suggested this. Um, when I had it up here a second ago. Uh, Hold on.
so the earliest use of ocracy is from 1831 in the writing of Charles Fulk Greville, a political and social diarist who apparently, when his diaries were released, were they were quite scandalous. But he used ocracy as in as a suffix in writing.
Okay.
So
Well, I want Ferris Bueller.
yes.
Um, his quote very early in the show is, "Not that I condone fascism or any ism for that matter. Isms, in my opinion, are not good.
Well, there you go.
A person should not believe in an ism. He should believe in himself."
Yeah, okay. Which is, I suppose, solipsism.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but the first question is, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, well, uh, I'm drinking it's a straight bourbon whiskey from Detroit Whiskey. It's their X brand, um, with a little bit of my usual Fever Tree ginger beer and several generous splashes of this Ironfish brand. It is a cherry maple smoked bitters,
Oh,
and
interesting.
it's very nice.
Looks like cough syrup.
Well, it's in that kind of a bottle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something you might get in an apothecary.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you sir, what's your libation for the evening?
I have, as you can see, an empty glass.
Or you had?
Have because I made myself a smoked
Oh,
old fashioned with Uncle Nearest 1884 and
okay.
put it smoked. This bottle was full of smoke, which has since dissipated, I think, because this was not airtight. But I have agitated it with the bourbon and will now, when you I do this fresh,
Here we
it's
are, folks. We're live.
it's great because smoke pours out and you can see maybe a little bit of
I
residual
don't think
smoke,
it's
not
not coming
much.
across the camera.
Yeah, but um I we were at a restaurant when they served their old fashions that way, so you get all the smoke and it's really good. So
Sounds great.
here's to you.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, wow, yeah, it really comes through. So the 1884 has a bit more bite than the 1856, so I think it holds up well in cocktails. So
Okay.
whereas the 1856, I think is a nice sipping bourbon.
I haven't tried, I think I've had the 1884, but I don't think I've tried the 1856.
Yeah. So, um, this came to mind because of a term called kakistocracy.
Yes.
Kakistocracy, which is um,
It
the
comes, I think it comes from the Latin cacare, which means shit.
yes, it is government by those who are least qualified, a kakistocracy. So.
So this is, I think we should be pointing out as we go along here that
Yeah.
a lot of these aren't, people don't declare themselves these things. O-
No,
Oftentimes it's declared one to be one thing and is ends up being labeled this another.
yes. It depends on your point of view.
Yes.
But this occurred to me. I saw an article recently. I've seen other similar articles that 50% of men believe that they, in an emergency, could land a jet airplane.
Well, land is a relative term, I think. Land safely? Yeah,
Yeah.
not so much.
Similarly, a high percentage of men believe that they could score a point in tennis playing against Serena Williams. Now,
50% of men,
we
yeah,
no, I didn't
unlikely.
say 50%. I think that percentage is higher, actually.
Oh, no,
Um, there's a we've talked about the Dunning-Kruger syndrome before,
right,
where the least those with the least amount of knowledge think they are more capable than they are.
right.
Um, so it occurred to me to think about this that, and this, of course, is relates to current events. What cabinet post in the government do you believe that you're qualified for?
Ooh, uh, I could probably uh, polish it pretty well if there was a cab,
Yeah, the
nice,
cabinet,
little
yes.
Murphy's oil
But
soap.
no,
Yeah.
no, I don't, I am not qualified to be secretary of
Which is
name a
another kind of
cabinet post.
cabinet, technically.
Yes, yes. But cabinet post, minister of in other
Right.
countries. In
No,
the
I
in the
agree.
federal government. I'm not qualified for that. I don't have the governmental experience. I don't have the experience managing that large
Right.
budget. I have certainly, as an educator, some knowledge of education, but I'm not, that's the closest thing, and I'm nowhere near being qualified to be
Well,
Secretary of Education.
and we've talked about this before in that it used to be, or at least I've always thought that, because I recognize that I'm not qualified to do all these things. When I'm looking for a candidate, what I'm looking for is someone who is smarter than me and
Yes,
more qualified to do the job than I am.
yes,
I'm looking for the most qualified
yes.
and
And
most
so,
intelligent,
right,
highest of character, all that stuff.
absolutely. I completely agree.
And that's not
Instead,
limited to party.
I, yes, also agree. And so the term kakistocracy, a government by those who are least qualified, is the people, if somebody offers you a job, that kind of job that you're not qualified for, the honorable thing to do is say, are you, I'm not qualified for that. I cannot do that job. I
Right.
I am no, that's not my area of expertise. I don't have that experience to do that. Um, but those who accept that nomination without the qualifications either think that they are mistakenly think that they are qualified,
Uh-huh.
or they don't care because they understand their real qualification is loyalty to the autocrat, the person in power, which is autocracy, which is another one,
Yeah.
another ocracy.
Well, and so is kleptocracy,
Yes,
where and that person where that same individual you're talking about may take the position because not because they could do a good job, but because they could enrich themselves by it.
yes. Um, now, a kleptocracy where people profit
Right.
from corrupt leaders profit from they use political power to enrich themselves, to expropriate the wealth of the people, and so on. That can occur in a kakistocracy, it can occur in
Oh,
a democracy.
sure.
It is easier when that's in an autocracy.
Yes.
Most autocratic governments, those ruled by a single individual, supreme power is vested, concentrated in one person or one small group of people. That's an autocracy.
Right.
It's easier to steal money from the people when you've got all the power.
Right. When uh, there's no recourse to any system that could make that right.
There's no one else with any power, any ability. There are no checks and balances.
Right.
And so, um,
So you end up in many cases when it's an autocracy, you end up with it being a bunch of other ocracies as well.
yes, the so democracy on the one hand, and there are different forms of democracy. There's direct democracy. There is
Representative
representative
republic.
democracy, which is the form that we have for now, if we can hold on to it, as Benjamin Franklin said.
Yep.
Um, but on the other end, you have an autocracy concentrated in a person or a group of people, an oligarchy where it's effectively concentrated in the hands of a small group of
Hmm.
wealthy, an aristocracy, um,
Which is a birthright.
birthright one, a theocracy where it's concentrated in religious authorities, um, a plutocracy where it's concentrated in the power is concentrated in the hands of the wealthy,
Right.
government by the wealthy, which can alter and affect any form of government. Some of these are interrelated, some of these can occur. It seems that we are always and have always been throughout the history of the United States and the world, really,
Yeah.
in a conflict between those who believe in a democracy or representative democracy and those who want power for themselves. Um, so uh, the it's useful, I think, to look at these terms, look at the manifestations of them, and think about those in terms of what is just, what is honorable, um,
Yeah.
what is honest, um, because the people who we would recognize as being part of a kakistocracy or autocracy or any of
Uh-huh.
those are not honest with themselves, or they're at least if they are, they're not honest with everyone else. They may say, I'm doing this for the good of the people, but they're doing it to enrich themselves, to be loyal to the supreme leader, to so um as I said, it's it is dishonorable to accept a position that you are not qualified for simply because you either want to enrich yourself or enhance the power of the
Right.
autocrat.
And we can talk about the sort of um, as is becoming more apparent the weaknesses of a representative democracy.
Yes.
Um, we want to claim that a democracy is also a meritocracy, right? That we are supposed to be, and the whole we're talking about
Meritocracy, government by those
most qualified,
most qualified based on qualification.
right? And this is what our, again, we go back to our founding fathers. They said that you can't have a decent moral republic unless your population is also decent, moral, and educated.
Yes.
Because how can you pick someone who's best qualified to do that job if you yourself are uneducated?
Yes. And I had a discussion with a good acquaintance about politics. And one of the things that came up, as it often does in discussions of difficult issues, and something that I have often stressed to students, is the difference between an opinion and a conclusion based
Hmm.
on facts, evidence, data, and how to determine if the evidence is credible, the facts are
Right.
credible, the sources are credible, the information can be verified that you're basing your conclusions upon. Um, I found I always find conversations like that, I find them worthwhile but difficult,
Well,
um,
yeah.
because it is, I'm there, the story, there are two wolves in yourself, then which
Yeah.
one you feed. But the two wolves in myself are the one that believes in facts and the one that has taught persuasion
Ah,
and right
yeah.
and practiced persuasion in advertising and marketing. I have always held that advertising, the best and most effective advertising, is telling the truth in an interesting way.
Yes.
The problem I have with political advertising is it doesn't require, there's no truth in advertising laws governing political advertising. And
Right.
the misrepresentation and lies and bullshit I see in political advertising is enormously frustrating. And I, another statistic is that I just saw this about more people get their news, quote unquote news, form their opinions based on social media influencers.
Influencers. Oh my God.
And social media influencers tend to be male, they're overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly conservative.
Yeah.
And that's where people are getting their news and information and forming their opinions. And in the conversation I had, I was hearing talking points. I was hearing
Right.
easily disproven talking points, but the counter information was not believable to the
Well,
person you're
confirmation
talking
bias
to.
there is the
Yes, which
culprit.
we've also talked about. I
Hmm.
have asked students before where they get their news, and for most of them, it was social media.
Right.
And I said, "Do you when's the last time you read a newspaper?" And it was
Well, when was the last time they saw a newspaper?
right. Well, even online,
Yeah.
I have, I have news apps. But
Right.
I have right, left, center, US based, overseas based,
Yep.
um, and, um, and I mentioned this and those were largely dismissed. Oh, those are
Mainstream.
mainstream.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's a
this is the
reason.
problem.
Yeah.
The
So,
overwhelming, the influencers you're talking about, these talking heads that have channels with
Yeah.
millions of followers or whatever. They are they're consciously trying to undermine mainstream media
Yes.
for their own purposes. I mean, it's
And profit. Yeah.
oh yeah, right. You can't trust them. I'm here to everybody ought to stop and go, wait a minute. Whenever somebody says in any situation, don't listen to them. I'm the only one who can tell you the truth. That is the biggest red flag in any kind of relationship.
Yes. When there's a great book called When Religion Turns Evil. And I'll wouldn't I'll look up I'll give people the author's name. Um, but he gives the signs of when it's a religion becomes a cult
Yeah,
and becomes
yeah, I'm
evil.
familiar
And
with
one
this.
of them is a claim of absolute authority and knowledge that you can't trust anyone else. It's only me. I I am the only one. This is the truth. And
Well, and I've pointed out to people online too that if you are saying to yourself, if you find yourself saying that only this source is true and everyone else who contradicts them is in on the conspiracy, you're
yes,
in a cult. You're trapped.
the
If
app the the absence of evidence is not it is
not proof of the
no,
opposite.
but that's what they're saying. So the book is When Religion Becomes Evil, Five Warning Signs, by Charles Kimball. Um, and the five warning signs of corruption in religion:
Hmm.
absolute truth claims, number one; blind obedience, number two; establishing the ideal time; the end justifies any means; and declaring holy war. And those are,
And see, to me, the last three are evil. The first two are pretty much every religion there is. That's kind of
absolute truth.
why it's a religion and not just a philosophy.
Well, not every religion requires blind obedience.
Well, those
Um,
first two things, well, okay,
although
but
I certainly, uh, many years, decades ago, got in this rather vigorous discussion with a rabbi who said, um, I remember this. I remember him saying that God doesn't care if you believe, only that you obey.
obey. Hmm.
And I said, no,
Did you actually,
no.
did your no actually start with a B and end with a shit?
I said, no, that's not
Uh-huh.
how I read it. And so that yeah, I had several interesting discussions about, um,
Like we've talked about this before that the oath we've both taken in our organization of it's not part of the oath. It's part of the admonishment before you take the oath that you
yes,
have to be respectful of all faiths.
never offending the faith of another. Yes.
Right.
Now, but that doesn't mean the way, and we have talked about this,
Yeah.
that you have to be respectful of the faith that somebody has. You respect their right to believe whatever they want, even if you don't respect what it is that they believe. You respect their right to believe it.
Yes. Okay. And then yes, we have talked about that. But that to me that is a struggle. The fact that the fact that you can that an individual can put all of their belief systems around something with no evidence whatsoever makes me distrustful of their judgment
Oh
in
yeah.
anything.
Yeah. it doesn't that that
So it
doesn't
undermines my
require
respect.
you, it doesn't require you to respect them.
Well, right. But if I can respect, I have to respect their faith, but I don't have to respect the thing they have faith in or them. So
Right.
so
You
that's a
res
kind of a struggle.
you respect an individual's right to make their own choice. You do not have to respect the choice they make or them as a consequence of the choice.
Exactly. And
And yeah, I find that, yeah, I mean, we have talked about this because it is a struggle. It can be a struggle that, I mentioned this before. I was teaching a class and I was talking about evidence versus opinion and said something about people believing in a flat earth. And a student
yeah,
said, "Oh, my family, or no, flat earth. They think the moon." A student said that they thought their family thought that
we never went to the
no, the
moon.
family thought I'm messing up the story. In the consequence of this and evidence and stuff, and talking about this, a student offered that their family thought that dinosaurs were faked, that the Earth
Oh,
was young, that it was new, the dinosaur evidence was faked. And she didn't agree with them. She said she didn't agree with them. And I said, "Oh, okay, good." And then she said, "But I think the moon landing was faked." And I said, "Would it make a difference to you if I explained and showed you proof that the ability to fake the video of the films of the moon landing that were shot on the moon, that capability to fake that did not exist in 1969, that the technology to to convincingly fake that didn't exist yet?" She
right.
said, "No, that wouldn't make a difference." I said, "Well, then let's let's leave it there for the moment." I turned to the rest of the class and I talked more about evidence and conclusions and how you reach those and what proof is. And I have over the years had to give them a list of non-credible sources that are very easily found online for stuff that they would be looking for. It's like they would look for stuff, and there were several that always came up, and I said, "Don't use these.
Right.
This is clickbait," and I had to explain what clickbait is.
You had
So,
to explain to them what clickbait was?
oh yeah,
Oh my God.
yes, but apparently I'm old and don't understand
Yeah,
technology,
right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah, that was
Or
my
social
point.
media, or um, I the the I think we have often, being interested in history and interested in medieval history and interested in all kinds of history, looked back on previous times, people who lived through oppressive regimes, theocracies, aristocracies, monarchies,
Hmm.
and said, how would people put up with this? How could they or willingly embrace it when they had something like a parliamentary system, a democracy, and then were willing to
Give it up.
return to or give it up, and many people over the past couple of weeks have posted a clip from one of the Star Wars movies where Padme is saying, "This is how
I
dem
posted it.
hmm? How
I
democracy
posted that. This is
ends,
how liberty dies
liberty
with
dies."
thunderous applause.
Yes, because that's the point at which people vote voted the Senate, the Galactic Senate,
Hmm.
voted to give um, the chancellor more
Yep.
power.
Yep. Because it's more efficient.
Well, it is that,
Yeah.
even though the whole at least Mussolini made the trains run on time, that's bullshit too.
Yeah.
And
Right. Yeah. Um, and I think that this is what, oddly, in our most recent election, most of the exit polls and stuff that I've seen where people were, I mean, a lot of people just didn't show up, which is weird to me that you could be less engaged in this election than you were in the 2020 election. But
yes,
but people were straight voting their pocketbook. They thought that their taxes would be lower and prices would be down under a Republican administration.
which is
And
contrary to evidence.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And yeah, the
they're
this has been
misremembering the last administration about how good everything was. That's
yeah,
gas was $4 a gallon.
yeah.
Yeah,
Except during the pandemic because nobody was going anywhere.
right. Yeah, supply and demand.
Yes.
There was no
So,
demand in the supply. We had plenty of supply, so people don't remember the, well, a lot of people, you and I remember rationing of gasoline in the 70s.
yes. Oh, yeah.
And that had to do with, or at least it was widely believed that that was when OPEC first
Hmm.
formed, and they raised prices so high that and limited production to raise prices.
Yeah.
And we simply didn't have we couldn't import enough to satisfy our
Right. Yep.
ravenous need for fossil fuels at the time. So people were forced to alternate days when they could buy gas.
And,
Um,
and people don't understand that the global petroleum market is it's not we make it here, we own it, we use it. No, we make one kind here, it goes there, it's refined. We bring something else here, it's refined for a different purpose.
right.
It's in the the 18th century and the founding of this country, um, I think it was Jefferson, wrote something about it was his plan to encourage manufacturing in the United States, in the new United States.
Yes.
And it involved tariffs.
Hmm.
It involved applying tariffs to goods that were imported in order to raise the price of them to a point where domestic manufacturing could meet that price,
Right.
um, and so establish itself. And that made sense at the time. The problem now,
Well, because we were in the infancies of manufacturing at the time.
yes,
We were still
and there was a and manufacturing was much simpler in a
oh
lot of
yeah,
ways. It didn't, we're not talking about manufacturing automobiles that have thousands of parts that have to be
right.
sourced from different suppliers. It's
You're talking
it
about guys building clocks one at a time.
right. That's different.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the
the,
Industrial Revolution was a thing, and it
yes, and well, and was happen. I mean, that's concurrent with that, and
well
shortly after that. But
yeah, it was
yeah,
somewhat after that. Yeah.
yeah. The but the idea now is that tariffs would not only raise the price of components that go into products that are manufactured, that are
Hmm.
assembled in the United
Yep.
States. But that's not the way to encourage domestic manufacturing. And in fact, in the current administration, what they have done by investment is spark manufacturing, domestic manufacturing in a way that hasn't happened in a while.
Well, the
Domestic manufacturing has increased because of that for things that are essential,
well,
like
like in the 18th century, they invested in new industries,
yeah,
right? So, and domestically produced new industries, green
yes,
energy, and that kind of thing. You can't. We have abandoned in this country many segments of manufacturing because
right,
it's been cheaper to get it somewhere else. The
yeah,
factories closed not because people didn't want to work, but because the corporate owners decided that they could get it cheaper and sell at a higher margin by importing the product.
yes, and
So those jobs aren't going to come back because this other country is going to.
well, the jobs won't come back, and the manufacturing won't come back simply by raising the prices through
Right.
tariffs on imported goods. The manufacturing has to be come back through a different way than tariffs, because this isn't the 18th fucking century.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Um, and yeah, so, but again, we're talking evidence. We're talking, I think the one ocracy we haven't mentioned yet that I think is the most pertinent to what we're talking about is idiocracy.
Yes. Yes. Prophetic movie, so
It
seemingly.
it was supposed to be an absurdist comedy,
Yep.
not a documentary.
No, but I mean, it's certainly got its value from like any dystopian story, right?
Yes.
It's taking a trajectory that's currently visible and elevating it so that it becomes a larger problem in the future,
Yes.
right? So, and that instead of saying, you know, uh, fresh water became hard to come by, or a, a nuclear war had wiped out, major cities and most of the population. This just pointed out that people are descending into an uneducated, stupid, complacent place.
Yeah.
And, and because they're allowed to, and it serves somebody to have society do that.
Yes. Um um
So we also haven't talked about we talked about ocracies, and one of them in the list here is an ergotocracy,
yes.
which is apparently coined in a treatise about communism.
Yeah.
So, so there's an ism instead of an ocracy, but it's often considered diametrically opposed to a democracy. This country, it's put out as the opposite of democracy, communism, and they're different. One's a system of government, one's a economic system.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
communism and capitalism are the opposing isms, really,
right.
because communism tends toward totalitarianism or autocracy, as it
Well,
has every place
yes,
that it's been attempted. Um,
but I think that's because, and this is my personal take on communism and this ergotocracy thing. I believe in philosophically in capitalism. We've talked about this before, that I believe in it philosophically because it recognizes the basic sort of human desire or need to improve your lot for yourself and your progeny. Communism, in its purest form, doesn't doesn't really allow that or doesn't recognize that need. It's a it's a very sort of um, nebulous kind of, well, if you know, the rising tide raises all boats kind of thing. If you innovate or improve a system or whatever, everyone benefits, including you. But the incentive has to be a communal incentive. You have to see that it's better for me if everyone does better. And I think that's tough to prove in the human animal.
I think that there are cultures where people, Western culture, certainly, United States is more individualistic culture. There are cultures where that are more communal in their
Yes,
focus and less individualistic.
but I would also maintain that communism as a philosophy, as an idea, is great. I mean, let's all pool our resources and make sure everyone's doing at least okay, right? So that there's nobody has a ridiculous amount more than anybody else. You know, we're all doing okay. Everybody helps everybody else survive, and we work as hard as you can, produce as much as you can, and then we share as much as you can.
Right.
The problem with that is that it doesn't scale.
Right. It
And
works. It only works in small groups.
yes,
Um,
and it only
yeah,
works particularly in an agrarian sort of society.
yeah. A commune,
Yeah, right. Now, that's where the word
literally.
comes from, right?
Um, I think communism as a form of government is as much a fantasy as libertarianism,
Well, that's
which
what I mean.
is it's kind of its opposite because that's all the individual,
Right.
only the individual, and doesn't allow for any kind of community really in a lot of ways. The thing we've talked about before that humans evolved to be social, to
Hmm.
to have communities. That was their strength. And there's evidence. The I think Margaret Mead talked about this. She said the earliest evidence that humanity evolved, and this was pre-Homo sapien, I think, or maybe a very early Homo sapien, was that they found a skeleton with a broken femur that had healed,
Right.
and a society that could and would take care of someone with that serious an injury until it healed
Right.
and support them is a communal society. But communism, as it doesn't scale, it becomes every time it becomes totalitarianism.
Right. Because that's the
And
only way you can organize something like that. Again, I see it that way because it's not a natural tendency and it requires an authoritarian, it must be forced on large
yeah,
communities. People, because it only takes a couple of people to decide that, you know, we can take advantage of this
yeah.
for it to collapse. So you have to have a strong authority willing to enforce it for everyone.
And they end up taking advantage of
Exactly. And that is
it.
power corrupting absolutely. As
I watched the recent series, The Three Body Problem,
Mhm.
which I've also downloaded the books. I'm going to read them. But it begins during the Cultural Revolution in China,
Yep.
and that's I don't recall the brutality of that, being depicted on film before. Um, because the ideal was an agrarian society, and people who were educated were demonized for their education.
Well, yeah, well, because that made them elite.
Yes.
And the idea in that, as in a lot of people point to as the problem with communism is that it doesn't elevate everybody. And I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying that this is the claim that rather than elevating everybody, it drags everybody down to a level. Like
The handicapper
the handicapper
general
general.
from
Yes, we've
Kurt
referred to this
Vonnegut.
on many occasions.
For those who aren't familiar with that, as the idea uh, Vonnegut depicted a society in which, so that no one would feel bad, people who were had advantages were handicapped.
Right.
So ballet dancers had to dance with heavy boots on, and uh, artists had to wear big, heavy gloves, and it was things like that. So,
Yeah, people
they,
that were smart had to wear something that distracted them all the
right,
time.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But oh, I had something I was going to say about that. Oh, so yeah, so it's being sold to us as it drags everybody down. Now, our American experiment by our founding fathers, we I say we, they, I should say, recognize that going back to educating your population, they believed that for this whole system to work, they created free public education. That was not a thing anywhere. And um, it worked. It worked for 100 years,
yeah,
or at least it made things better. I mean, they were always poor and they were always rich, but there was a middle class that could move of its own accord. It wasn't a class you were born into. It wasn't, you could rise above your father's station, which was kind of a new thing.
yeah.
Um, and it worked, and our education system progressed and it improved, and we had for a while, I think we had the highest literacy in the world,
Not
but we
anymore.
don't anymore.
No.
Um, the famous uh, speech soliloquy by Jeff Daniels
Yeah,
in,
I was just thinking about that. The
yeah, I don't remember
beginning
what movie
of,
that was.
oh, it was a TV series. Um, TV series. He's a newscaster, and he's being interviewed with a group of people, and a young woman says, "Why is America the greatest country in the world?"
Yeah,
And one of the other panelists says, "Freedom," and someone else says something, "Opportunity," and he says, "It's not, but it
it's
could
not the
be,
greatest. Yeah,
but it could be," and he lists a bunch of statistics. And he says, including literacy and life expectancy, and
yep,
um, he says, but it could be, and um,
it
uh,
was once, and it
it
could
was
be.
once, and it could be again. Um, yeah, not. Yeah,
So going back to our list of things here, I think that we are, and as you started to say earlier, I think we are slipping. I don't want to use the word inexorably, but it feels like it at the moment that we are slipping into a plutocracy that wants to be a theocracy.
yeah. There's certainly, well, there's an alliance
Yes,
between the oligarchs and the theocrats,
yes,
between those who want, and the oligarchs talk the language of the theocrats to appeal to them and their followers while fleecing them for
Well,
money.
well, certainly taking their money, but I mean, their policies are getting through. They're
Yes,
being pushed down to local levels.
yes.
Um,
Um,
and what's interesting to me is the same people that talk are the originalists and the constitutionalists are allied with these people. That those two really kind of diametrically opposed philosophies are colluding to to secure power.
well, the so-called originalists in legal circles, the Supreme Court, those who
Hmm.
claim to be originalists, what the Constitution says, their scholarship is usually shit.
Well, yeah,
And it's completely self-serving. Here's what I conclude. Let me find the evidence to support that. It's when people do that with the Bible, it's called, isn't it called exegesis? I think.
exogenesis.
Yeah, the series was the newsroom, by the way.
Yes, that's right.
Exegesis,
Exegesis.
well, exegesis is critical explanation or interpretation of a text, especially of scripture. However, people use it not critically, they use it as propaganda,
Well,
propagandistic
right.
exegesis. So, um, say, well, it says this. There's actually a scholar I follow, and he posts videos where he people make claims, and he says, well,
Dan
actually,
McClellan.
yes, the text says this, and it
Yeah.
doesn't say that, and yeah, I follow him. It's
Yep.
interesting stuff. Um, but I had that discussion with someone once. I said, well, uh, you realize, and I did not, I was not challenging their right to believe what they believe, but they were insisting on something that was not true, and they were pushing it. They were not respecting my belief to not believe what they believe. And I said, what you're claiming is based on mistranslation.
Right.
And they said, it's not mistranslation, it's divinely inspired correction.
So
Well,
why would an all-powerful, all-seeing, omnipotent being need to correct themselves?
always correcting the humans who made mistakes in there
So the
and
first
writing
time
down.
the first time somebody was divinely inspired, God got it wrong. God failed to inspire correctly the first time and now has to go back and say, no, 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 that's not what I meant. How come you couldn't, how come God couldn't make himself clear the first time?
You know, the theocratic police are going to come looking for both of us, I think, at some point.
That's fine. My Second Amendment will protect me.
Yeah. Uh, mm. Well, that's certainly been a topic of discussion lately as well. So,
Yeah, let's
um,
not get into that.
no, well, we have talked about some aspects of that before, but um, so I think what it comes down to is again veritas, honesty. But honesty is not simply being honest about how you feel. It's being honest about what you're capable of and not yet capable of, or may never be capable of. It's honest about what you think and what you feel. No, it's honest about knowing the difference. And if
Right.
you're being honest about what you think, then you have to, you are required to develop prowess in understanding what's real, what's factual, what's provable, and what's not.
Agreed.
If you're going to be, if your opinion, your conclusions are worth a damn.
Well, and I also
I
we should
respect
also
people's right to be wrong. I just don't like it.
yeah. Yeah, you can't make everything as wrong as you are. You're not allowed. As you know, that's and one should always within our milieu of the chivalric virtues here, you should always seek justice.
Yes.
And you cannot attain justice without truth.
Yeah.
So,
And if you don't have the ability to distinguish truth from lies or truth from bullshit, and there's a difference between
yeah, sure.
lie, a liar takes into account what is true and contradicts it. A bullshitter doesn't care about truth or lies, just makes stuff up
Yeah.
for their own purposes. But
Well, there's a difference between misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda.
yes, that's
So,
another topic we could
yeah, we
talk
could.
about.
Um,
Yep.
and we're obviously against all of those things.
Yeah.
But
Well, because justice requires truth.
yeah,
So,
so yeah, so if you cannot claim to be just if you indulge in any of those things.
right.
Even to me, you cannot claim to be just even if you are willfully ignorant,
No, that's no
right?
excuse.
Right. You can't say, well, I don't I, I'm not considering that in this argument. That's not worth talking about, or I'm dismissing that because I don't think your source is credible.
Hmm.
So therefore, I'm gonna maintain this course. I'm gonna ignore everything that doesn't support my cause.
Or willfully misinterpret it because of um,
Yes.
selective reasoning and cognitive bias. Um, I just watched a movie, um, The Denial, and it was a movie with Rachel Weisz as Professor Deborah Lipstadt, who wrote a book. She's a historian of Jewish history and Holocaust history
Okay.
at Emory University in Atlanta. And she wrote a book, and in it, this was back in the 90s, she criticized uh, David Irving, a World War II and Hitler historian, British,
Okay.
um, uh, because he was denying that the Holocaust happened. And he sued her for libel but in a British court, and where the rules are different for libel.
Yeah.
Truth there, here, truth is a defense of libel and slander.
Yes.
There it isn't. The
You only have to show malice in Britain.
she had to she had to prove that um, he was intentionally um, being deceitful.
So he sued her,
He sued her and
but
she
she
won.
had to prove that he was being
Right,
deceitful.
right. It was,
Wow.
yeah. Um, so simply saying that what she said was true was not a defense. It was really interesting.
Did
Um,
she win?
she did win.
Okay.
She
What
did
was
win.
what was her defense?
Well, her attorneys um showed proved to the court, and there was no jury, it was simply a judge.
Hmm.
Um who was overseeing this, and that was by um, Irving's choice. She, her attorneys proved that he had been deceptive in his books
Okay.
about this, that he had intentionally, that it was not that he actually believed what he was saying. It was that he distorted, misinterpreted, willfully misinterpreted, willfully omitted facts that would disprove what he was saying in
Right.
order to support his claims, and he did so for not for historical accuracy, but for to support a political agenda. And so
But it seems
that,
like a tough thing to prove that you knew it and didn't write it. I mean, that,
yeah, one example was he intentionally mistranslated writings from he found there were German documents that he intentionally mistranslated so that they would appear different to
oh,
his readers.
hmm, okay.
Yeah, there were a bunch of things. It was really interesting movie. And Rachel, it's interesting because Rachel Weisz was playing an American with a Brooklyn accent, and she's actually English.
Oh,
So,
okay.
um, but but that's the case where, yeah, it is you, as you said, justice requires truth. And
This
yeah,
to me has been part of the problem, I think, with our this last political campaign season. That how can there's so much if it's not if I'm being generous and saying that it is not actual disinformation or propaganda, if it's actually just ignorance, how, ignoring or not looking hard enough for the truth, how can you claim to be just? And the conclusion I've come to is that people don't care about being just. Enough people don't care about being just. They want to be on top, and that's all.
well, I think some people aren't concerned about being on top. They're concerned about just keeping their heads above water. And though
Some, but
some,
but it's got
right.
to be at somebody's expense, and then it's
Well,
okay.
I think some, yes, for some that's true. I think for some people, um, when people are struggling just to make ends meet,
Right?
they are less concerned, historically, less concerned about political issues and justice and even truth. And
Sure.
so it has been in times of greatest economic prosperity that people have had that the population has demanded more justice, more rights, um
Sure.
more of that. Like the 60s was a time of pretty unique
Mm-hmm.
economic prosperity. And what did we see? Civil rights movement, women's movement, um, um, LGBTQ movement for rights, because people had, if you needed to, you could find a job. You
Well,
could
that's
quit and
yes.
find a job. People had the means. There were, so keeping one of the techniques that um, an oligarchy, an autocracy uses is to keep most people struggling economically because then they are far less likely to object. It's when that struggle becomes unbearable, then you get the French Revolution, right?
Right.
Um,
And the communist revolution.
right. When it is so it's there's something in pricing economics, the pain point.
Hmm.
How much can you raise the price of something until people will stop buying it? What's that pain point
Yep.
where, and that's similar to how much can you make people struggle just to have food and shelter and clothing in
I'm
and and if you make it too hard, then they've got nothing to lose, and then there's a revolution.
I'm wondering what's going to happen. I think the fast food industry, which has always survived very nicely in this country.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we've exported our fast food industries all over the world, and it's becoming, and I think they are reaching that they're actively looking for that pain point now.
Yeah.
It used to be, yeah, of course you can, um, if you buy food and cook it, it's it's better for you and probably cheaper. But this is still pretty cheap. It's not as nutritive, obviously. It's not as good for you, but it's still relatively cheap and it's so convenient.
Yes.
Well, they're making it less convenient. Well, I guess in some ways. I mean, it, they're they're putting it back on everything is back on the customer. You got to get the app. You got to use the kiosk. Nobody's there to take your order anymore. They're there to fill your order. So
I
you don't
haven't
get,
been to a fast food place in
well, but you
many
see it in the
years.
news
And
all the time that,
yeah, yeah. They're
so,
the ordering kiosks,
yep, they don't have someone standing behind a
taking your
register
order. Yeah.
taking your order. They're only processing your payment sometimes. You can do it all there at the kiosk, or they want you to use your telephone, your cell
Yeah.
phone to do it. And it's all about reducing the head count, but it's also reducing service.
Yeah.
And we're finding people like interacting with someone in that commercial setting, and they're raising the prices. Now, I just saw somebody we both know posted a picture of a Five Guys burger. And that's the other thing. I mean, my stepdaughter quoted back to me the word the enshittification, the ongoing enshittification of everything.
Yeah.
Um, and it is absolutely unequivocally driven by capitalism.
Yeah.
So the burgers, are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, um, and they're charging more and more for them. And this is the case with lots of consumer products.
Oh, cereal boxes have
Sure.
gotten
Oh,
thinner,
yeah,
same dimensions or maybe slightly, but thinner. So there's less in them, and the same price or more.
right.
Um,
And we're both aware of uh, shelving strategies,
oh yeah. Yeah.
right? And how packaging you want to take up space on the shelf.
Yeah.
That's a strategy for making more sales. But
Well, and a
how can
lot
you
of
make it? Hmm?
yeah, a lot of grocery stores make a significant amount of their profit from what are called slotting fees, where product manufacturers pay grocery stores for prime space on their shelves.
Yep, yep. So eh, so the it's not. We keep talking about this free, or we. There are those who continue to talk about a free market. The market ain't free, hasn't been for decades.
Right.
Competition is being undercut. Uh, you know,
Well, I I taught a media course, a survey of media course years ago, and every week was a different type of media from its origins to its current state. Newspapers and books and television and radio and other film and other forms of media. And the one student finally slammed his book down. He said, "It's the same." It was like midway through the semester. He said, "It's the same every week. Somebody invents something, somebody else steals from it and makes money off of it. And the guy who invented it doesn't get anything. And then there are hundreds of people doing this. And now there's only three companies that own all of it."
Yep.
Said, "Well, congratulations.
And who is
You
one of the
figured this
greatest,
out." Yeah.
who's one of the greatest American heroes of the modern age? Thomas Edison.
Well, he invented inventing.
He didn't invent, he might have invented or had a hand in inventing, but
He
he he was a
systematized. Yeah.
yeah, he
He
owned
system. Go ahead.
he owned a company that employed scientists to invent things.
Yes.
And they signed away their personal rights to the invention, and the Edison company capitalized on it.
Yep.
They probably got a little bonus when they invented something that worked, but then that's it. You don't know any of those people. No, none of those names, echo down the ages. It's just Thomas Edison.
Yeah.
And this is the same. Elon Musk is the same thing, right? He made, I, I don't know if he had any intellectual investment in PayPal, right? I know his family
No,
were,
PayPal was another guy.
no,
No,
I'm pretty
Thiel,
sure.
Peter Thiel's PayPal. You're his, I don't think that was Musk, but Musk inherited money. He didn't invent Tesla. He bought Tesla from two guys.
Yeah, but Tesla wasn't his first.
No, I don't think it was
Yeah,
PayPal.
his money, his the money that he could having money to invest came from inheriting from his emerald mine owning
Yeah,
parents.
yeah,
But but he his first venture, and I was pretty sure it was PayPal. He got involved in PayPal and made a huge amount of money when that was sold off. And that was his big springboard into being the multi-billionaire. That was buying Tesla. That was, lots of other things. But yeah, so this is money making more money.
yes, exactly.
Uh,
Um,
we talk about how in this country, if you work hard and you innovate, you can do anything. You can go anywhere. You can rise to the top, and you got to have the right. I mean, there are exceptions, of course. I mean, uh, even Jeff Bezos. I really have fewer problems with Jeff Bezos than I do with Elon Musk. I mean, Bezos built a smart company. He used a
yeah.
smart model and built that company, and it works. It's a good product. Um, so okay, nobody competed. He but then he went out and expanded that and bought out competitors and consumed their innovation. And that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Well, it's become so the the economic system of the United States has always been um, big E devouring the small in some ways. The since the robber baron era. Um, but it used to be that people would start a company and then that was their thing, and they would run that company and grow it and hand it off to heirs or sell it
Right.
when they retired. Now, being a serial entrepreneur is a thing where you start a company hoping that it will become successful enough that you'll get bought out by one of the big companies.
Right.
And that's a different kind of model. Um,
Yeah, and it's like just said a few minutes ago, people want to talk about a free market and innovation, and that's not what's driving our economy anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I just looked up. So one of the things that um, Musk did was he had a company that was an online bank, merged it with another online bank, and the bank he merged with you had owned PayPal.
okay.
And so then um he became CEO of the merged company. Um, but PayPal, the company that created PayPal, was founded by someone else.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Right. But yeah. Um, so and then it was required acquired by eBay, and then so yeah, it's he's his he's about uh, yeah, it's capitalism. He has
Yeah.
capital and he uses that to acquire things that make money
To
and
acquire more capital.
right,
You take power to get more power. You raise capital to get more capital. That's
right. Yeah.
and what we were talking about, like you said, back, I don't know, I think the robber barons and so on, the there were laws back in those days about a company becoming so big that it could monopolize
Yeah.
a product or an industry and set prices because you couldn't get it anywhere else.
Trust busting
Teddy
and
Roosevelt, my man.
antitrust has not been enforced for a long time. There's
Or
occasionally you'll see, an airline wants to buy another airline, and the regulators say no. Well, who has expressed interest in dismantling the regulatory state,
mhm. Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. It's there the regulatory body is still there. The Federal Trade Commission, right? The
Yeah,
FTC.
yeah,
It's just that somehow the bar for what is considered a monopoly just keeps kind of sliding up.
yeah.
And well, what's when do we consider this so noisome that we have to do something about it? Well, it's just I'm not privy enough to the process to understand what their criteria is because there doesn't seem to be much,
No,
right?
no.
Are we allowed to have when will it be enough? When there's only five companies, or when there's only four companies, or three, or two, or when one company owns the entire nation?
Um, yeah, that's
Rollerball.
it's been speculated in a number of dystopic
Yep.
fiction works. Um, Taco Bell becomes the only restaurant, right? In
Yeah.
what
But
was
that's
the Stallone and Wesley Snipes and Sandra
um,
Bullock
um,
in
de
Demolition Man.
Demolition Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Taco
that's
Bell is the only restaurant.
which is kind of funny because Taco Bell is actually owned by Pepsi Cola,
Right.
right? So it behooves Pepsi to have a bunch of different fast food restaurants. It's the illusion of choice, right? We
Yeah.
That's another thing
Yeah.
we talked about. And and Pepsi, I read this recently that the reason owns so many um, fast food type places, KFC, Taco Bell, Burger King, I think, two or three others. No, maybe not Burger King.
You'll even see them co-located
Yeah.
in a
They,
single store. Yeah,
yep. That happened because Coca-Cola had a lock on the fast food market.
right.
So Pepsi said, "Oh, well, we'll just buy the restaurant chain and we can put our Pepsi product in there and we can pay ourselves to supply our soda."
Yeah.
So this is that's a seems like a trust to me.
Yeah, the and the key to McDonald's growth was they bought the land
Yeah.
on which the McDonald's were built. I'm not calling it a restaurant. They bought the land and then leased it to the franchisee.
Yes. So they're
So
guaranteed to make money no
yes,
matter what.
yeah. So it's a yeah. So um I think I think a lot of people understand that the system is rigged. They're just looking at the wrong people as the source of the problem.
Okay. You're obvious clearly tens of millions of people are looking in the wrong direction for the source of the problem. That's clear.
Popularity of an opinion doesn't make it a fact, doesn't make it correct.
Correct. Yeah, that is absolutely right. That
And
is objectively
neither
true.
neither you nor I have ever shied away from reaching our own conclusions, whether or not anybody else agreed with us.
Right. It's gotten me in trouble on more than one occasion.
Well, certainly gotten me into some interesting conversations.
Well, and I'm as you say that I'm reminded of a one of the greatest comic book pages to me that's ever been inked or published. And it's a scene between Spider-Man and this is super nerddom here I'm going into Spider-Man and Captain America. And
Where are you
Captain
from,
America,
kid? You got a lot of heart. Queens. I'm from Brooklyn.
yeah, well,
That was a great little scene in the movie.
but this, um, I think it's a quote actually by Mark Twain, but Captain America speaks on how, and I can't quote the whole thing, but I have the book just because it has this panel in it. And he says something like, there comes a time when,
Oh yeah,
though everybody is saying you're wrong and you need to move out of the way, it is your job as an American to plant yourself like a tree in the road and say, no, you move.
to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth
There it is.
and
Yep.
tell the whole world, no, you move.
Was I correct? Was it Mark Twain?
Um, it,
Or are
uh,
you looking up this Captain America quote?
I looked up the Captain America quotation.
Okay.
It's a variation of a quotation from Mark Twain.
Okay.
Let men label you as they may, if you alone of all the nation decide one way, and that way be the right way by your convictions of the right, you have done your duty by yourself and by your country. Hold up your head, for you have nothing to be ashamed of. When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move.
And then the end of the comic panel, my favorite thing is Spider-Man looks up at him and he says, "Can I like carry your books or something?" Which is absolutely great.
Now, I think there has been I um um what's his name? Conservative writer during the 60s, 70s, William F. Buckley Jr.
Oh, oh. William F. Buckley.
Yeah. Pompous,
Yep.
but at least the debates between between Buckley and Gore Vidal were they were heated, but they were intelligent.
Yes.
Um, but Buckley, in his founding of um, the conservative magazine, I'm trying to remember the name. Anyway, he said, our job is to stand athwart history and say, no, no further.
Right.
And that's different. That's not like what Mark Twain and Captain America said. That's more like what the old priest in Name of the Rose, Umberto Eco's
Oh,
novel, and the movie with Sean Connery. And little spoiler here. This old priest says, there is no new knowledge. There is only divinely inspired recapitulation.
right.
And that is what Buckley is saying. Whereas what Captain America is saying and what reiterating Mark Twain is that no, the individual conscience, and that is respecting people's right to believe what they believe, even if you
Yes.
don't respect their choice, you're respecting their right to believe that, and them saying no, I won't do that. Great, you don't have to, you don't, yeah,
Well,
but
and I've often thought of that passage and that quote, and the in some ways it's a I think people will use that as an excuse to say, no, my opinion is just as important as your knowledge.
yeah, then that's
Okay.
the my Isaac Asimov quote, which finish your thought for a second
So
here.
so the that the no, no, you move. If the entire nation says this is the way, you need to move out of the way, and you absolutely believe the strength of your conviction says no, you move, and everybody goes around you,
Hmm.
you will be left behind.
Yeah,
And this we have to balance this against, well, just because everybody believes something doesn't mean it's right, right? So progress, William F. Buckley would stand like a tree next to the river, what he believes is the truth, and say, no, this is it. No, you can't go any further. And society progress will go, sorry, you don't have to move. You can stay here. But the rest of us are going that way.
and that's the difference, is that he didn't want anybody to
Right.
move. He didn't
Yes.
want to say, no, I'm not changing my mind. You do what you want to do. He's saying, no, I'm not changing my mind, and you have to agree with me. And that's the difference.
Right.
Um,
Right. Move. You move. You're allowed to move.
yeah,
It's not, no, you can't go any further. You just have to move.
yeah. I'm not
Okay.
moving where you want me to, but yeah, but you can go where you
We'll go
want to.
around you.
So Isaac Asimov, um, writer, professor, scientist, um, said, anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread
Yes.
winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and 76 million votes say some that it is.
Yeah. 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 So,
Well, that was depressing.
yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have any more to drink, so I think we should wrap it up so I
Wrap
can
it up so we can both go get another drink. Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, okay. Well, thank
Well,
you, everybody.
for if you've managed to hold on through this entire diatribe, we appreciate you.
Yeah,
Um, we have explored this, I think, to our, well, we've vented our frustrations in a lot of ways, which is something we do on occasion.
yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah,
gonna lie there, but um, we could talk about redefining all of these words and stuff, but we're really trying to apply things into our modern lives.
yeah,
And so these
yeah,
are how they affect us. We're using these terms as a way to spark these conversations.
yeah.
So I think we have successfully done that.
I think so. Okay.
So anyway, if you thought this was at all entertaining, please like, share, uh, follow us. Um, I have been mistaken in our well, we have almost 600 followers.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, our website, yeah, I thought we were in the low 40s, something like that last time I looked, but I think we have quite a few followers.
Wow.
Um, and that's amazing to me. And we are so grateful, so happy that that many people are willing to listen to our bullshit. So
I'm, yeah, wow. How did you'll have to show me where you got that from? Because wow.
yeah, well, it's in the it's in the dashboard of our
Yeah.
website
Okay.
thing.
Well, cool.
Pretty sure. Anyway, be another one, you
Cool.
out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Add yourself to
Okay.
that growing list
Yeah.
of informed and intelligent listeners.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And until we see you next time, be thou
A good night.
and true.